After selling my company for $25 million, I threw a lavish retirement party filled with toasts and celebrations. But just before the key toast, I noticed my son-in-law pour something into my wine. When no one was looking, I quietly switched glasses with his father. A few minutes later, he began. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. Everything's ready, now we just wait. Clark's whisper barely reached Janet's ear as guests laughed nearby, their voices mixing with the crackling fireplace. 25 people filled my living room, celebrating my retirement from 40 years of banking. Crystal glasses caught the warm light, creating dancing reflections on the mahogany walls. Standing near the fireplace, I adjusted my navy blazer and surveyed the scene. Ann Cruz from the Hartford branch was telling animated stories about our old merger deals. Elwood Gomez raised his glass toward me from across the room. My colleagues had gathered to toast new horizons, though none suspected how dramatically my path would shift tonight. Lemuel, this is quite the party. Otis Marshall, my son-in-law's father, approached with his characteristic shuffling gait. The 72-year-old former accountant wore his best brown jacket, slightly wrinkled but pressed with care. Your daughter outdid herself with the arrangements. Janet moved gracefully between groups in her elegant black dress, playing the perfect hostess. She stationed herself near the serving table, monitoring the wine bottles and appetizer platters. Her smile never wavered, but something flickered behind her eyes when she glanced toward Clark. "Friends," I called out, tapping my empty wine glass with a silver letter opener. "Allow me to gather everyone for a toast." The conversations gradually quieted. Clark checked his watch for the third time in 10 minutes, his dark suit impeccable, but his nervous energy barely contained. He patted his jacket pocket in a gesture that seemed unconscious, then moved toward the serving table where fresh glasses of Bordeaux waited. Guests began forming a semicircle around me. The firelight painted their faces with warmth as I prepared my speech about new adventures and grateful memories. From my position, I could observe the entire room. Decades of banking had taught me to notice details others missed. Clark approached the wine service with deliberate casualness. His movements appeared natural to casual observers, but my trained eye caught the slight tremor in his hands as he reached into his jacket. A small bottle emerged, barely visible in his palm. I continued speaking about friendship and legacy while watching Clark add drops of clear liquid to one specific glass, the one positioned at the front of the serving tray, the glass I would naturally select for my toast. "To new horizons and continued health," I concluded, raising my empty glass as applause filled the room. During the moment when all eyes focused on me, I made my move. While guests reached for their wine, I stepped behind the thick column supporting the staircase. From this concealed position, I watched Clark return to Janet's side, his mission complete. The serving table bustled with activity as people selected glasses. I emerged from behind the column and approached casually, knowing exactly which glass to avoid. Instead, I selected one from the second row and guided Otis toward the doctored glass at the front. "Otis, this one looks particularly full," I suggested, gesturing toward Clark's prepared glass. "Why, thank you, Lemuel. Always thinking of others." Otis accepted the glass with genuine gratitude. We raised our wine together, the room filled with warm wishes and clinking crystal. Otis took a generous sip, savoring the vintage Bordeaux. I merely touched the rim to my lips, watching his reaction carefully. 10 minutes passed with normal conversation. Then Otis's complexion began changing. His ruddy cheeks grew pale, and he set down his glass with shaking fingers. "Something's wrong," he gasped, gripping the mantelpiece for support. "There's such a bitter taste in my mouth. I feel dizzy." The festive atmosphere shattered instantly. Guests rushed forward as Otis collapsed into the wingback chair beside the fireplace. His breathing became labored, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cool October evening. "Dad, this is terrible. Poor Otis." Janet's voice carried the perfect note of shocked concern as she knelt beside him. Clark hovered nearby, his face a mask of worried confusion. "Maybe alcohol doesn't mix well with his medications. He takes several prescriptions." I maintained my composure while dialing emergency services. "Yes, we need an ambulance at 47 Maple Ridge Road. Elderly gentleman, possible allergic reaction." The paramedics arrived within 12 minutes. They worked efficiently, checking Otis's vital signs and asking about potential allergens. His condition stabilized, but they insisted on immediate hospital transport. "We'll get him the care he needs," the lead paramedic assured me as they wheeled Otis toward the ambulance. Guests began departing, expressing sympathy and concern. I stood in my driveway, watching the ambulance doors close on Otis Marshall. The red lights disappeared around the corner, leaving only the quiet Connecticut night. As the last visitors offered their condolences, I noticed the small bottle Clark had discarded in the decorative planter beside the front steps. While shaking hands and accepting well wishes, I quietly retrieved it and slipped it into my pocket. The party debris remained scattered throughout my house, but my mind focused on a single, chilling realization. Someone had tried to poison me tonight. My hands trembled slightly as I waved goodbye to Eleanor Watson, the last guest to leave. The motion felt foreign. 40 years of banking had trained me to maintain steady control, yet tonight's events had shaken something fundamental. I consciously steadied my fingers, refusing to let the facade crack where others might observe. The next 15 minutes blurred together in a sequence of polite departures. Colleagues expressed shock about poor Otis, wondering aloud about allergies and medical complications. I accepted their sympathy with practiced grace, playing the concerned host while my mind raced through darker possibilities. "Terrible shame about Otis," Anne Cruz murmured, gathering her coat from the hallway closet. "Such a sweet man. I hope the doctors figure out what caused this reaction." Elwood Gomez lingered longer, helping me collect empty glasses and straighten furniture. "Need any help with cleanup, Lemuel? This kind of evening leaves quite a mess." "Thank you, but I'll manage. Go home to your family." After the final car pulled away, silence settled over my house like a heavy blanket. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 8:30 as I locked the front door and turned toward my study. Inside the oak-paneled room that had witnessed decades of financial decisions, I pulled out the small bottle from my pocket. The glass felt cold against my palm, its contents nearly depleted but still detectable. No pharmaceutical markings, no manufacturer labels, just clear liquid in an unmarked vial. $25 million, I said aloud to the empty room. That's what they were interested in, wasn't it? Memory fragments began connecting like puzzle pieces. Janet's visit last month, asking casual questions about my estate planning, her sudden interest in my will, which she'd never mentioned before. "Dad, could you show me your estate documents? Just curious about the legal language these days." Then Clark's conversation 2 weeks ago, suggesting I consider transferring assets while still alive. His financial advisor mask hadn't quite concealed the hungry calculation in his eyes. "Lemuel, at your age, you really should think about moving wealth to the next generation. Tax implications can be significant." I walked to my wine cellar, a temperature-controlled room beneath the main floor. Among the vintage bottles and storage racks, I found what I was looking for. The household trash bin contained an empty vial, identical to the one in my pocket. Clark had prepared backup supplies. The evidence painted a clear picture. My daughter and son-in-law had planned my murder with methodical precision. They'd researched poisons, prepared the delivery system, and attended my retirement party, ready to become wealthy overnight. But their plan had failed spectacularly. Instead of inheriting millions, they'd nearly killed Clark's own father. I returned to my study and settled behind the mahogany desk, where I'd negotiated countless business deals. The family photograph showing Janet's wedding day stared back at me, her radiant smile now seeming predatory in this new context. 2 choices lay before me: contact the police and watch my daughter face criminal charges, or handle this situation personally. The banking world had taught me that some problems require discreet, strategic solutions rather than public scandals. The police would need extensive evidence, lengthy investigations, and courtroom proceedings. Janet would hire expensive lawyers, claim ignorance, and potentially escape serious consequences. Meanwhile, the family name would be dragged through newspapers and tabloids. My alternative offered more satisfying possibilities. "If they want to play these games," I murmured, opening my desk drawer to retrieve a legal pad, "I'll show them who the real professional is." 40 years of financial expertise had given me tools far more sophisticated than crude poison. I understood money flows, asset protection, and legal maneuvering better than most attorneys. My daughter and son-in-law had chosen the wrong target for their amateur criminal enterprise. I began drafting preliminary notes about my counterattack, Their greed would become their weakness. I simply needed to create the right incentives and watch them destroy themselves. The grandfather clock chimed 9 times as I stared at the family photograph on my desk. Janet's smile mocked me from behind the glass, representing years of deception I'd been too trusting to recognize. With deliberate finality, I turned the photograph face down and reached for my phone. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. The phone's shrill ring cut through morning silence, my coffee cup pausing mid-sip as I recognized the hospital number on caller ID. Sleep had eluded me through the dark hours, my mind cycling through evidence and implications while dawn crept across the Connecticut landscape. Mr. Murray, this is Dr. Patricia Hendricks from Greenwich Hospital. I'm calling about Otis Marshall. How is he, doctor? Stable, thankfully, but I need to inform you that our toxicology results show definitive poisoning. Mr. Marshall ingested a significant amount of antifreeze compound, ethylene glycol. Without immediate treatment, this could have been fatal. The clinical confirmation struck like a physical blow. Poisoning? Are you certain? Absolutely. The symptoms, blood work, and chemical analysis all confirm deliberate ingestion. We've contacted the police, as required by law, in suspected poisoning cases. They may want to interview you about the party. After ending the call, I sat in my study reviewing the night's discoveries. The empty bottle, the switched glasses, Otis lying unconscious while my daughter and son-in-law played concerned relatives. Everything pointed toward premeditated murder. At 10:30, Janet and Clark arrived unannounced. Their rental sedan pulled into my circular driveway, both emerging with practiced expressions of worry and sympathy. Dad, we came as soon as we heard from the hospital. Janet rushed through my front door, her designer coat and perfectly applied makeup suggesting careful preparation rather than hasty concern. Clark followed, carrying a small flower arrangement. Lemuel, this whole situation is just terrible. How could poor Otis have been poisoned? The hospital called us too, since we're family. I guided them to the living room where last night's drama had unfolded. The serving table remained exactly as the paramedics had left it, wine glasses still scattered across its polished surface. The doctors confirmed antifreeze poisoning, I announced, studying their reactions carefully. Janet's face crumpled with theatrical horror. Dad, that's awful. Poor Otis must have ingested something by accident. Maybe there was contamination in the wine or food. How could this happen at your party? Clark added, his nervous energy manifesting in rapid pacing. Everything seemed so normal. Maybe he had some kind of allergic reaction that mimicked poisoning. Time for the crucial test. Actually, I said slowly, watching their faces, there's something strange the doctors don't know yet. Otis was drinking from my glass when he collapsed. We switched during the toast because his looked empty. The words hit them like electric shocks. Janet's composure cracked visibly, her eyes widening with genuine alarm. Clark stopped mid-pace, his face draining of color. From your glass? They said simultaneously, their voices overlapping in shared panic. Yes, I continued, maintaining calm observation. Good thing I decided not to drink that evening. I only pretended during the toast. You know how alcohol affects my medication. Clark's hands began trembling as he processed the implications. If the poison had been intended for me, then Otis was an unintended victim of their murder plot. Janet sank into the sofa, her theatrical concern replaced by barely controlled terror. But why would anyone want to poison you? Janet asked, her voice hollow. That's exactly what I intend to find out, I replied meaningfully. They departed 20 minutes later, claiming urgent errands and doctor appointments. Their hasty retreat confirmed everything I needed to know about their guilt. After their car disappeared, I returned to my home office and began systematic planning. The wine glasses from last night's party remained on the serving table. I carefully bagged the one Clark had doctored, preserving fingerprints and residual poison traces. My computer held decades of financial records, legal documents, and banking connections. Janet and Clark had attempted amateur murder, but I would respond with professional-grade financial warfare. I pulled out a fresh legal pad and wrote, Financial Review, Priority 1, at the top. Below that, I began listing their vulnerabilities. Clark's gambling debts, Janet's shopping expenses, their mortgaged house, and mounting credit card balances. They wanted my money desperately enough to commit murder. Now, I would use that desperation to destroy them completely. The game had officially begun. My hands gripped the steering wheel as morning traffic thickened on I-95 toward Manhattan. The legal pad slid across the passenger seat with each lane change. Its bold heading, Financial Review, Priority 1, catching dashboard light. 8 o'clock traffic moved slowly, giving me time to refine my strategy during the hour-long drive from Greenwich. The Madison Avenue office building rose 30 floors above the financial district, its glass facade reflecting October sunshine. My private office on the 22nd floor had served as command center for countless banking operations over 4 decades. Today, it would coordinate something far more personal. Security systems recognized my key card at 9:15 a.m. The weekend quiet felt different from weekday energy, more conducive to sensitive research. I activated my computer terminal and accessed secure banking networks that most civilians never knew existed. "Who has been making inquiries about my accounts recently?" I asked Thomas Chen, my contact at First National Securities. "Let me check the inquiry logs, Mr. Murray." Keyboard clicking filled the brief silence. "Actually, yes. Several requests from people identifying themselves as your relatives. A Janet Marshall and Clark Marshall made multiple calls about your portfolio structure." The confirmation hit like a physical blow. "When did these inquiries begin?" "First one was September 15th. Most recent was last Thursday, the day before your retirement party." They had been planning this for over a month, carefully mapping my financial landscape before attempting murder. The methodical preparation revealed professional-level criminal thinking, not amateur desperation. I spent the next 4 hours systematically checking every institution where I maintained accounts. The pattern emerged clearly. Janet and Clark had contacted banks, investment firms, and insurance companies, probing for information about my assets and estate planning. Memory fragments took on sinister new meaning. Janet's casual questions about my will weren't daughterly concern. They were reconnaissance missions. Clark's suggestions about transferring wealth weren't financial advice, but intelligence gathering for their murder plot. Driving home to Greenwich at 2 p.m., I reviewed security footage from my home surveillance system. Digital recordings showed Janet and Clark's previous visits with fresh clarity. Their body language, whispered conversations, and intense interest in my study took on criminal significance. "Elwood," I dialed my longtime colleague from the passenger seat of my parked BMW. "Lemuel, how are you feeling after Friday's excitement?" "Actually, I need your help with a financial investigation. Can we meet this evening?" Elwood Gomez arrived at my house at 4 p.m., his weathered face showing concern. We sat in my study, surrounded by 4 decades of banking awards and family photographs that now felt tainted. "Elwood, I need to find out about my daughter and her husband's debts, discreetly." His experienced eyes sharpened with professional interest. "What kind of debts are we talking about?" "Everything: credit cards, mortgages, personal loans, gambling obligations. I want a complete financial profile." "Lemuel, if you're considering cutting them off financially—" "They plan to kill me, Elwood." The words came out flat and emotionless. Friday's poisoning wasn't random. They tried to murder me for my inheritance. The room fell silent except for the grandfather clock's steady ticking. Elwood's face transformed from concern to cold anger as I explained the evidence. The switched glasses, the doctored wine, and their panicked reactions to learning about the glass switch. "What do you need from me?" By Sunday evening, I had compiled a comprehensive dossier on Janet and Clark Marshall. Their financial vulnerabilities painted a clear picture: mortgage payments 3 months behind, credit card debt exceeding $60,000, and Clark's gambling losses from Atlantic City casinos, totaling another $40,000. They weren't just greedy, they were desperate. Desperate enough for murder. I closed the dossier file and checked the time. 6:30 p.m. Tomorrow would bring the next phase of my counterattack. I selected a tasteful flower arrangement from the florist's website and purchased a small digital recorder from an electronics store. Standing before my bedroom mirror, I practiced expressions of sympathetic concern. The face looking back appeared genuinely worried about poor Otis's condition. Perfect. My reflection showed a man preparing for battle, armed with 4 decades of financial expertise, and motivated by something far more powerful than money: the cold fury of betrayal. Monday morning had crawled by with methodical preparation. I selected appropriate gifts: flowers that weren't too cheerful, fruit that suggested health concerns rather than celebration, The digital recorder, no larger than a matchbox, disappeared into my jacket pocket after I confirmed its sensitivity through several test recordings. The drive to New Haven Hospital took 45 minutes through Connecticut countryside. Autumn colors blazed across rolling hills, a stark contrast to the grim purpose of my mission. I parked among other visitors' cars and gathered my props: flowers, fruit basket, and concerned grandfather expression. Room 318 held the medicinal smell of disinfectant and the steady rhythm of monitoring equipment. Otis lay propped against white pillows, his usually ruddy complexion pale as parchment. An IV drip connected to his left arm, and his breathing remained shallow but steady. "Lemuel!" His voice carried genuine relief mixed with profound shame. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "Of course I came, Otis." I arranged the flowers on his bedside table, activating the recorder with subtle finger pressure. "How are you feeling?" "Physically, much better, but emotionally—" He turned his face toward the window. "Lemuel, I'm so ashamed. I never thought he would actually do it." Perfect opening. I pulled the visitor's chair closer to his bed, maintaining supportive body language while the recorder captured every word. "Otis, what exactly happened Friday night? The doctor said you were poisoned." The floodgates opened. "Clark said you needed help making decisions about inheritance. He told me you were getting confused about money, making poor choices." Otis's voice broke with emotion. "He said we needed to help you sleep deeply so he could convince you to transfer assets to Janet while you were relaxed. And you believed sleeping medication would help me make decisions?" "He said it would just be temporary unconsciousness. I never wanted to hurt you, Lemuel. He showed me articles about elderly people making bad financial choices. Said we were protecting you from yourself." The manipulation ran deeper than I'd suspected. Clark had convinced his own father that drugging me was a mercy, not murder. The psychological exploitation disgusted me more than the attempted poisoning. "Tell me everything from the beginning, Otis." For the next hour, the full conspiracy unfolded. Clark had researched inheritance law, investigated my banking relationships, and developed a comprehensive plan to access my wealth. The sleeping medication, ethylene glycol disguised as wine enhancer, was supposed to cause what appeared to be natural heart failure in an elderly man. "But when you switched glasses," Otis began crying softly. I realized what Clark had really planned. Not sleeping medication, not temporary unconsciousness. Murder. Did Janet know the real plan? She knew everything. They practiced their reactions, planned their alibis. Janet was supposed to inherit immediately as next of kin, then share with Clark according to their prenuptial agreement. The recorder captured every detail of their criminal conspiracy: timeline, methodology, financial motives, and post-murder plans. This evidence would destroy them both in any legal proceeding. "Otis, I need your help to stop them." His watery eyes met mine with desperate gratitude. "Anything, Lemuel. I'll do anything to make this right. They can't know we've talked about this. Continue acting like the confused victim. Let them believe their story worked. What are you planning? Justice, but not through courts and lawyers. Something more appropriate." The afternoon nurse knocked gently before entering for evening rounds. I squeezed Otis's hand reassuringly, the gesture appearing compassionate to casual observers. "We'll talk again soon," I promised, leaving him uncertain whether my words carried threat or promise. In the hospital parking lot, I reviewed the recorder's contents. Crystal clear audio, every damning detail preserved in digital format. Clark and Janet Marshall had sealed their fate with their own words, spoken through the mouth of their first victim. Tomorrow, the real destruction would begin. Monday evening had been spent in my study, making appointments and researching shell company formation procedures. Legal paperwork spread across my desk as I prepared the infrastructure for financial warfare. By midnight, I had scheduled meetings with 3 banks, 2 debt collection agencies, and 1 very discreet attorney. Tuesday morning found Elwood and me walking through Manhattan's financial district. His connections complemented mine, creating access to information systems that would have taken weeks to penetrate alone. "Lemuel, are you sure you want to act so aggressively?" Elwood asked as we entered Chase Manhattan's marble lobby. "They plan to kill me, Elwood. This is just the beginning." Our banking tour yielded devastating intelligence. Clark Marshall owed gambling debts to Atlantic City organizations that didn't accept late payments graciously. Janet's credit card spending had spiraled beyond any reasonable income level. Their mortgage company was preparing foreclosure paperwork. At a discreet law office near Wall Street, I established 3 shell companies with untraceable ownership structures. These entities would purchase Janet and Clark's debts at discount rates, then demand immediate payment through legitimate legal channels. The debt acquisition process moved with startling efficiency. Desperate creditors accepted 40 cents on the dollar for debts they considered uncollectible. By Wednesday afternoon, my shell companies owned over $150,000 of Marshall family obligations. Send the demand letters simultaneously, I instructed my attorney. Full payment required within 72 hours, or face immediate legal action. The phone call came at 4:30 p.m. while I reviewed additional debt opportunities. Lemuel, we're in crisis. Clark's voice carried panic barely controlled by forced calm. Every bank is demanding immediate payment. They're threatening foreclosure, repossession, legal action. We need help. I'm sorry to hear about your troubles, Clark. We went to the bank this morning. They said our debts were sold to collection agencies. The new owners are demanding everything immediately. Perfect. The financial pressure was working exactly as designed. After Otis's accident, I've reconsidered my financial priorities, I replied with calculated coldness. I'm establishing a medical fund for his ongoing treatment. But we're family. Janet is your daughter. Family doesn't try to poison each other at retirement parties. Silence stretched across the connection as my words sank in. Then Janet's voice, shrill with desperation. Dad, you can't abandon us. We have nowhere else to turn. You should have considered that before Friday evening. I ended the call and walked to my office window. 30 floors below, their rental car waited at a red light. Even from this distance, I could see Janet's animated gestures as she argued with Clark in the driver's seat. They had come to Manhattan expecting sympathy and financial rescue. Instead, they discovered their debts consolidated under new ownership and their escape routes systematically eliminated. Opening my desk drawer, I retrieved Otis's recorded confession and placed it beside my computer. The old man's voice describing their murder plot would make fascinating listening for the right audience. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized but never expected to use. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Hartford Field Office. Thursday morning brought a different rhythm to my Greenwich study. Instead of reviewing financial documents, I prepared for the inevitable. Clark's desperation would manifest as action. 40 years of banking had taught me to predict human behavior under financial pressure. The phone rang at 10:30 a.m., precisely when I expected. Lemuel, we need to meet. I have an incredible opportunity for you. Clark's voice carried forced enthusiasm, masking panic. After selling your company, you have a unique position to multiply your capital significantly. What kind of opportunity? Something too sensitive for phone discussion. Can you meet us for lunch tomorrow? Manhattan has the privacy we need for this conversation. The trap was being set, but not by me. Friday afternoon found me navigating Manhattan traffic toward an upscale restaurant in Midtown. The establishment Clark had chosen reflected his pretensions. White tablecloths, expensive wine list, discreet booth seating, perfect for confidential conversations. Janet greeted me with theatrical warmth, her designer outfit suggesting recently maxed credit cards. Dad, you look wonderful. This difficult week seems to be behind us. Clark introduced his companion with practiced smoothness. Lemuel, meet Ellis Ortiz. Ellis manages exclusive investment opportunities for select clientele. Ellis Ortiz appeared exactly as central casting would order for a confidence man, tailored suit, perfectly groomed silver hair, gold watch catching restaurant lighting. His handshake conveyed sincerity, while his eyes calculated my worth. Mr. Murray, your son-in-law speaks highly of your financial acumen. Our fund offers opportunities typically reserved for institutional investors. His voice carried educated authority with subtle urgency. We guarantee 300% annual returns through proprietary trading algorithms. The pitch unfolded with professional precision. Ellis presented leather folders containing impressive charts, testimonials from satisfied investors, and guarantees that would make legitimate fund managers laugh. Clark nodded enthusiastically, while Janet watched my reactions with desperate hope. Sounds tempting, I replied, playing my role as interested but cautious retiree. But I need more than promises. What specific securities does your fund trade? Ellis deflected with practiced skill. Our strategies require absolute confidentiality. Premature disclosure would compromise algorithmic advantages. However, I can guarantee your initial investment will triple within 12 months. The minimum investment is $10 million, Clark added urgently. Dad, this represents a unique chance to secure the grandchildren's future. I leaned back, stroking my chin thoughtfully. $10 million is substantial. I need documentation, references from other investors, and detailed performance records. Of course. Ellis produced business cards with impressive Manhattan addresses. However, this opportunity closes Monday. Global market conditions create narrow windows for optimal entry. The artificial time pressure confirmed my suspicions. Every element of Ellis's presentation followed classic fraud patterns. Exclusive access, guaranteed returns, urgent deadlines, and documentation always promised for next time. Fine, I announced after appropriate hesitation, but I want to meet other investors and review complete prospectus materials before transferring funds. Clark's relief was palpable. Janet squeezed my hand with genuine gratitude. Ellis smiled like a predator, recognizing easy prey. Excellent decision, Mr. Murray. I'll prepare comprehensive materials for Monday's meeting. Your financial future just became significantly brighter. After settling the restaurant bill, I walked to my car while they remained inside, discussing their success. Through the window, I watched Clark gesturing excitedly while Ellis took notes on legal papers. The recording device in my jacket pocket had captured every word of their criminal conspiracy. Ellis's promises of guaranteed returns violated numerous securities regulations, while Clark's knowing participation made him complicit in federal fraud charges. I drove toward Greenwich, my grip tightening on the steering wheel as I considered the perfect symmetry. They'd tried to poison me for money. Now they were poisoning themselves with greed. The drive home from Manhattan stretched longer than usual, Friday evening traffic moving sluggishly through construction zones. I stopped for Chinese takeout I wouldn't eat, went through motions of normalcy while my mind processed the restaurant performance. Unlocking my front door as autumn darkness settled over Connecticut, the house felt different. Empty rooms that once welcomed family gatherings now echoed with betrayal. The grandfather clock's ticking seemed amplified in the silence. My careful facade finally cracked. Exhaustion hit like physical weight as I collapsed into my study chair. 3 hours of psychological theater had drained reserves I didn't know I possessed. Playing the naive Mark while recording their fraud required acting skills I'd never developed during 4 decades of straightforward banking. Family photographs lined my desk, their smiling faces now feeling like evidence in a criminal case. Janet's wedding picture showed radiant happiness I'd believed was genuine. Her childhood photos revealed the progression from loving daughter to manipulative adult I'd been too blind to recognize. Margaret's warnings echoed from beyond the grave. Lemuel, don't spoil Janet too much. She needs to understand money's value through earning it herself. But I'd ignored my wife's wisdom, showering our daughter with privileges that became expectations. College tuition, wedding expenses, down payments for houses, emergency loans that were never repaid. 30 years of unconditional financial support had created monsters. I pulled out financial records documenting decades of generosity. $200,000 for Janet's wedding, $50,000 for Clark's business venture, countless smaller amounts for vacations, cars, home improvements. The total exceeded $500,000 in gifts and loans. Dad, why can't you be more generous? Look how my friend's parents live. Janet's voice from years past carried new meaning. She'd never expressed gratitude, only demands for more. Clark's words burned even deeper. Old man, you're holding on to money too long. We need it now while we can enjoy it together. The progression was clear in hindsight. Each financial gift had increased their expectations while decreasing their appreciation. By the time they planned my murder, I'd become nothing more than an obstacle between them and their inheritance. Margaret's photograph smiled sadly from the mantelpiece. You were right about everything, I whispered to her memory. I created this situation by rewarding their selfishness. Saturday morning brought renewed focus. I reviewed Ellis's business cards and promotional materials, cross-referencing addresses with known fraud operations. His fund management company existed only as a mail drop in a business center. His references were phone numbers that went to voicemail. The scam was textbook fraud. Promise impossible returns, collect initial investments, pay early investors with new victims' money until the scheme collapsed. Clark and Janet had found the perfect partner for their criminal enterprise. Sunday evening brought unexpected clarity. The hurt father in me had given way to something colder and more determined. They'd chosen their path when they put poison in my wine glass. Everything that followed was consequence, not cruelty. Car doors slammed in my driveway as I organized weekend revelations. Through the window, I watched an unexpected figure emerge from a taxi. Otis Marshall, looking frail but determined, carrying a small overnight bag. His arrival would change everything. Monday's routine, coffee, morning news, financial markets review, was interrupted by taxi doors slamming outside my study window. Otis Marshall emerged slowly, his hospital pallor evident even from a distance. The driver helped him with a small overnight bag before disappearing down my circular driveway. I opened the front door before Otis could ring the bell. "Lemuel, I must tell you the whole truth about what my son planned." His voice carried exhaustion, mixed with desperate resolve. "Come in, Otis. You look like you need rest." I helped him into my study, activating the digital recorder while arranging cushions on the leather chair. His physical weakness was obvious. Hospital discharge didn't mean full recovery from ethylene glycol poisoning. "I'm ready to listen. Tell me everything from the beginning." What followed was 3 hours of devastating revelation. Otis had been manipulated by Clark for months, convinced that I was becoming senile and needed assistance making sound financial decisions. Clark had shown him fabricated evidence, forged medical records suggesting dementia, fake legal documents indicating reckless spending. He said you were planning to give everything to charities, leaving Janet with nothing. Otis's voice broke with shame. "Clark convinced me that temporary unconsciousness would let him guide you towards sensible estate planning. And you agreed to help him kill me? I thought it would just be deep sleep. Clark showed me articles about medication that would make you compliant, not what actually happened." Tears ran down his weathered cheeks. "But Friday night, when I drank from your glass and felt the burning, I understood what he really planned." The manipulation had been comprehensive. Clark had isolated his father from outside information, controlled his access to news and medical care, and gradually convinced him that poisoning was mercy rather than murder. Clark said you lived too long and the family needs money now. He showed me photographs of Janet crying about bills, said you were selfishly hoarding wealth while your daughter suffered. Yet you participated in attempted murder. I thought I was preventing suicide. Otis grabbed my arm with surprising strength. Clark said you were planning to overdose rather than face mental decline. He convinced me we were saving your life by making the decision for you. The psychological manipulation revealed Clark's sophistication. He had researched his father's weaknesses: loyalty to family, fear of losing mental capacity, desire to protect loved ones, and crafted narratives that transformed murder into mercy. "Otis, if you truly repent, will you help me punish them?" His response came without hesitation. "Yes, whatever you need." The alliance formed naturally. Otis would return to Clark as the confused victim, reporting that I remained gullible and ready for further manipulation. Meanwhile, he'd provide intelligence about their planning while I prepared the final trap. "Call Clark tonight. Tell him I'm eager to invest with Ellis, but I want to meet other successful clients first." "What if he suspects I'm working with you?" "He won't. Your son believes you're too weak and stupid to deceive him." As evening shadows lengthened across my driveway, I walked Otis to his pickup car. The frail man who'd entered my house as a broken conspirator was leaving as a determined ally. "Remember," I squeezed his shoulder, "you're confused about the poisoning, grateful to be alive, and completely convinced by their story about investment opportunities." Otis nodded nervously while getting into the car I'd arranged. As taillights disappeared around the corner, I stood backlit in my doorway, already planning the next phase. By tomorrow evening, Clark would believe victory was within reach. Instead, he'd be walking directly into federal custody. Tuesday morning found me researching surveillance equipment online while coffee cooled untouched beside my laptop. Consumer electronics had advanced remarkably since my banking days. Devices smaller than credit cards could record hours of high-definition video with crystal-clear audio. B&H Photo in Manhattan's electronics district became my first stop. The salesperson, a young man with impressive technical knowledge, helped me select a pen camera with 8-hour battery life and a shirt-button microphone with wireless transmission capabilities. These are popular with business professionals who need to document meetings, he explained while demonstrating the equipment. Completely undetectable when properly positioned. After testing the devices in my car, I drove back to Greenwich where Otis waited nervously in my study. His hands shook slightly as we reviewed the plan. "I need you to call Clark now," I instructed, activating the recording equipment. "Convince him that I'm completely trusting and ready for their investment scheme." Otis dialed with trembling fingers, his voice growing steadier as Clark answered. "Son, I think Lemuel is ready to proceed with your business opportunity." The words came out naturally, his acting improved by genuine fear. "He believes I had an allergic reaction to something at the party." Clark's response carried suspicious caution. "Dad, are you absolutely certain he doesn't suspect anything about the wine incident? He trusts me completely after the hospital stay. Actually, he feels guilty that I got sick at his celebration." Otis glanced at me for approval, receiving an encouraging nod. He mentioned having significant funds available for the right investment. "How much are we discussing?" He mentioned $25 million as his total liquid assets. Silence stretched across the connection before Clark's excitement broke through. "Perfect. Let me get Janet on the extension." Janet's voice joined the conversation with theatrical concern. "Otis, sweetie, tell Dad we only want what's best for the family. This investment opportunity could secure everyone's future." "He's very interested in meeting with your financial advisor again," Otis continued, "but he wants to see more documentation and meet other successful investors." "We can arrange that?" Clark's enthusiasm was palpable. Ellis has several satisfied clients who'd be willing to share testimonials. After ending the call, Otis slumped in his chair with exhaustion. That was harder than I expected. Lying to my own son. "You're correcting a terrible mistake," I reminded him. "They plan to murder me for money. What you're doing now is justice, not betrayal." Wednesday evening brought final preparations. We tested the recording equipment multiple times, ensuring clear audio and video capture from various angles. The pen camera, clipped to my jacket pocket, provided excellent coverage of anyone sitting across a restaurant table. "Tomorrow night at Le Bernardin," I reviewed, while Otis practiced his supporting role. "You'll confirm my enthusiasm for the investment while I play the eager but cautious retiree." What if Clark becomes suspicious? He won't. His greed will override his caution. I checked my watch. 8:30 p.m. "Remember, you're the confused victim who survived an unfortunate accident. I'm the wealthy father-in-law who finally sees the wisdom of their financial advice." We confirmed the reservation at Le Bernardin, Manhattan's premier seafood restaurant. The private dining room would provide perfect acoustics for recording equipment while maintaining the illusion of discreet business discussions. "Tomorrow night, we end this," I told Otis as he prepared to return to his New Jersey home. Both men looked at the reservation confirmation glowing on my phone screen. Halloween seemed an appropriately theatrical date for the final act of our elaborate deception. Halloween evening traffic moved sluggishly through Manhattan as I arrived early at Le Bernardin. The restaurant's understated elegance provided perfect cover for our operation. Wealthy businessmen conducting discreet financial discussions were commonplace here. The private dining room reservation ensured privacy, while the pen camera in my jacket captured everything. I tested the audio levels one final time before the conspirators arrived. Clark, Janet, and Ellis entered together at precisely 7 o'clock, their confident demeanor suggesting they believed victory was imminent. Janet wore her most expensive dress, presumably purchased with money they didn't have. Clark's suit looked freshly pressed, and Ellis carried a leather portfolio filled with impressive documentation. "Lemuel, you look wonderful," Janet embraced me with theatrical warmth. "Dad, this evening will change all our lives for the better." Ellis orchestrated the conversation with professional skill, presenting detailed charts showing the fund's supposed performance. "Mr. Murray, our clients typically see returns of 300% annually. Your initial investment of $10 million could become $30 million within 12 months. "That sounds incredible," I replied, playing my role perfectly. "But what guarantees do I have? Where exactly does the money go?" We utilize sophisticated offshore investment vehicles, Ellis explained, unknowingly providing perfect evidence for federal prosecutors. Funds are transferred through carefully structured accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, ensuring complete tax optimization. Clark leaned forward eagerly. Lemuel, this represents a unique opportunity to triple your wealth. Our fund specializes in exclusive deals unavailable to regular investors. What happens if market conditions change? I asked, encouraging more detailed explanations. The beauty of our system, Ellis continued, is that we simply transfer funds through multiple offshore accounts, and regardless of market performance, you receive guaranteed returns. It's completely risk-free. Janet squeezed my hand across the table. Dad, trust us. We're your family. We would never recommend anything that could hurt you financially. The irony was staggering. They were promising to triple my wealth while planning to steal every penny. How exactly do the offshore transfers work? I pressed for technical details. Ellis glanced around the private dining room, ensuring privacy, then lowered his voice. Between us, the money simply disappears into untraceable accounts. After a year, we claim investment losses while keeping the principal, but you'll never know that. You'll receive fabricated statements showing excellent performance. Clark nodded enthusiastically, then whispered to Ellis with shocking candor. The old man won't live long enough to investigate anyway. By the time he figures out the scam, we'll be living in the Caribbean. Sounds wonderful, I exclaimed aloud, maintaining my enthusiastic facade. When can we finalize everything? Tomorrow morning, Ellis replied smoothly. I'll prepare all transfer documents tonight. We can meet at my office to sign the agreements and initiate the wire transfers. The handshakes and false embraces outside the restaurant felt surreal. Clark and Janet disappeared into Halloween crowds, probably celebrating their anticipated windfall. Ellis vanished toward his office, likely preparing fraudulent documentation for our morning meeting. I walked to my car, pulled out my phone, and dialed the FBI number I'd memorized. It's time, I said simply when Agent Morrison answered. The trap was perfectly set. Tomorrow morning, instead of signing investment papers, they would be signing arrest warrants with their own recorded confessions. Friday morning's sunrise illuminated the FBI field office in Hartford as I arrived with comprehensive evidence files. Agent Morrison and her team had spent the night reviewing recorded conversations from Le Bernardin, preparing coordinated arrest operations. Mr. Murray, your recordings provide everything we need for solid convictions, Morrison confirmed while reviewing technical specifications. Attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, they've confessed to multiple federal crimes. The operation required precise timing. Clark and Janet expected to meet at Ellis's Manhattan office for document signing at 10 a.m. Ellis would be arrested simultaneously at his fake investment headquarters. Otis waited at a coffee shop nearby, ready to provide additional testimony if needed. We'll have teams positioned at all locations, Morrison explained. The arrests will happen simultaneously to prevent any escape attempts or evidence destruction. At 9:55 a.m., surveillance teams confirmed all targets were in position. Clark and Janet sat in Ellis's reception area, reviewing investment documents. Ellis arranged signing materials at his conference table. None suspected the trap awaiting them. Execute, Morrison commanded into her radio at exactly 10 a.m. The arrests unfolded with professional precision. Clark and Janet were handcuffed in Ellis's office just as they prepared to sign fraudulent investment agreements. Their shock was absolute. Janet screamed accusations while Clark stared in disbelief. Dad, how could you? I'm your daughter. Janet's voice cracked with desperate betrayal as agents read her rights. Clark's reaction combined rage with grudging admiration. You cunning old man, you planned every detail. Ellis's arrest at his office revealed additional evidence. Computers containing records of previous investment scams, victims across multiple states, and detailed plans for disappearing with stolen funds. The search of Clark and Janet's home uncovered more damning evidence. Research on inheritance law, printed articles about ethylene glycol poisoning, and handwritten notes calculating my estate's value. Media coverage began within hours. Standing outside my Greenwich home, I provided a carefully prepared statement to local news reporters. I simply want other elderly people to know that financial predators can come from anywhere, even family members. Trust must be earned and verified. The community response was overwhelming. Neighbors who'd known Janet since childhood expressed shock and support. My bank colleagues called, offering assistance and expressing admiration for my investigative work. That evening, Otis visited my house one final time. The frail man who'd been manipulated into attempted murder now carried himself with quiet dignity. "Thank you for giving me the chance to fix my terrible mistake," he said softly. "Justice has prevailed, Otis. Now we can both enjoy peaceful retirements." As sunset painted Connecticut hills in golden light, I stood in my driveway where the conspiracy had begun 2 weeks earlier. The grandfather clock inside my house chimed 6 times, marking not just the evening hour but the end of a dark chapter. Otis sat beside me on the front steps, 2 unlikely allies who'd found redemption through difficult choices. The house that had witnessed betrayal now sheltered justice achieved. I opened my front door, paused to look back at the driveway where poison had nearly ended my life, then closed that door firmly on the past. Tomorrow would bring the first day of my real retirement, peaceful, secure, and free from family predators. The phone would ring with legal updates and media requests, but tonight belonged to quiet satisfaction. Sometimes justice comes through courts and law enforcement. Sometimes it comes through careful planning and patient revenge. In my case, it had come through both. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.